I'm VJ Hamilton, and welcome to the Autoimmune RESET, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle, with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Autoimmune Reset podcast. I'm your host, VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist, and expert in autoimmune disease. And I'm very excited to welcome a special guest to the podcast today, Jennifer Brower, who is the author of Silent Killers. And Jennifer's life's changed in 1998 when she was bitten by a spider and developed Lyme disease. And there is a lot more to her story as well. And I love sharing people's stories who have been through chronic illness and managed to overcome them. So I will let Jennifer tell more of her story and let her introduce herself. But thank you for being here, Jennifer.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And, it's amazing to be able to reach across the seas like this, to be able to share with one another. So thank you for having me. And, and having Silent Killers, we've been doing a lot of work, and we have, it's interesting after we released this book early this year. It's like there's this wealth of knowledge that's come even since then, so I feel like I can do the new and revised and expanded edition.
Yeah, you just keep learning, don't you, with these things?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
Jennifer, your story is quite similar to mine in the sense that you had a whole career before this happened to you. And obviously now you're following this as a passion because you went through Lyme disease and mold toxicity and heavy metal toxicity. So I'd love to hear from you a bit more about your background, what you did before and how how the Lyme disease developed, what was your, main symptoms to begin with. Would you be able to just give us a bit more of that background?
Oh, sure. Yes. So Jacksonville hosted the Super Bowl here, and I didn't know. I had a sports marketing company at the time, and the spider bite had come well before the Super Bowl was here in Jacksonville, but it was laying dormant, and I didn't know it. So it wasn't until I went through running the ESPN division for the Super Bowl. We did all the events for ESPN.com, ESPN TV, ESPN Productions, all the ESPN offices. And that was quite stressful, but it was a fun stress, right? So it was a 4-day event. And so as I was going through that, though, and getting, you're planning and planning and planning for months and months in advance, and you go through this exciting time. And I started having like these weird little panic attacks. And I really thought it was because I was working so hard, and I had 3, children, small children at home, and I was just juggling so much and trying to balance family life, work. I think that shortly after the Super Bowl happened, my mother passed away, and I had some other traumatic events happen and I talk about in my book. But the bottom line is that I had an underlying condition of Lyme disease, and my body was able to fight it off, right? And it wasn't until we found mold in our home, and I had this trauma that my body did not withstand well. I don't think I had the tools quite to handle it. I just knew how to kind of juggle everything, but
Yeah.
not exactly do the best job, obviously juggling it all. And the next thing I knew is within a matter of weeks, I was pretty much face down. My body probably could have handled the Lyme and kept it at bay because the spider bite happened almost 10 years before. And so, obviously my immune system was working at the time. And then between the trauma and the mold exposure, everything started collapsing. So, and we had no idea. I was seeing so many doctors and talking to scientists, and the Lyme wasn't even a thing in Florida at the time. And as you said, you think that maybe in England it's there, but it's so underdiagnosed. Well, people would tell me all the time, "Oh, there's no way you've got Lyme. You live in Florida." And I was like, "Well, I'm not just here all the time, right?" But as events turned, we started realizing and finding out that at the time there were literally about 250,000 cases of Lyme in Florida, not diagnosed. So, I was definitely going against all the odds, right? It was not just, oh, you've got something that's a disease that's well known and tracked, and Lyme has so many different stages to it and variations, and so many people have different aspects of it. So some people might have joint pain. I had severe brain pain, like a burning sensation, but a lot of people have other issues that I didn't have. And so it's all handled so differently and treated so differently. I went when I finally got the correct diagnosis, I went through, bags and bags and bags of IV antibiotics, which helped, but also tore up my system. And it wasn't until I kind of moved into the non-Western world and started treating it with different types of herbs and, tinctures that I was able to get to more of the bottom of it.
Okay, well, if somebody, is listening to this and they have some strange chronic symptoms, which a lot of the time is how these conditions start, especially after a stressful event like you went through, and, the trauma and grief and everything that you were going through at that time. It's just useful to hear what your kind of main symptoms are. You mentioned the brain pain. Was there anything else going on that, was a kind of major symptom for you? And then maybe touch on some of the other symptoms of Lyme if somebody is not familiar with what that would look like. I know there are lots with these kind of systemic type illnesses. I know there's a lot of different symptoms, but what are the main ones that you come across?
Well, for me, I started having panic attacks. And so it was definitely affecting my central nervous system. And I couldn't understand why all of a sudden I wasn't sleeping. That so many people sleep all the time and have the chronic fatigue type syndromes. And mine was staying super wired. And I found that I became very electrosensitive. So Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, as all of those things were developing, it wasn't very, wasn't mainstay every day at that back then. And then all of a sudden it started coming out, and I found that I was very sensitive to it because my body was producing not enough GABA for me to try to give you all the information. I can't, because like I said, everybody has different symptoms, and sometimes it's more of a joint pain inflammation versus a brain fog. Anyway, we're trying to help other people identify all of the different aspects of Lyme. Can have similar symptoms, and that again can be joint pain, brain fog.
Okay, so I can see it's quite, there can be a lot going on, and I suppose that's why it's quite hard to diagnose just generally. And I think that is interesting about the central nervous system, the fact that you become, overstimulated and you're not able to calm your nervous system down. Because I think this can be missed even with kind of sleep issues. the fact that we're kind of so focused on getting to sleep and all the kind of nutrients to help get to sleep. But the truth is, it's about calming down your nervous system. And then we think about, well, what's stressing us out mentally? But the truth is, when we have these different pathogens in our body, they're causing this stimulation of the nervous system. So it's an interesting symptom, which I don't think people would pick up on if they started with panic attacks or not being able to sleep or waking up in the middle of the night. So I think it's just good to highlight that. But as you said, there are lots of different symptoms, and I realised that. In terms of the spider bite, I mean, that was quite an obvious thing that you experienced. And I know that it can be a tick bite with Lyme disease, which sometimes people might not notice as much. But what was that bite like, the 10 years before you got the symptoms?
It was crazy. I actually was down in Southwest Florida with my husband, and it was our 10th wedding anniversary. I was even further south in Florida. I live in Northeast Florida and was raised here, but South Florida, we were there, and the spider bite happened in the middle of the night. So I wasn't even really conscious of it. It was in the middle of the night, and I slapped my hand and just in the middle of the night. And then the next morning, I was unable to get out of bed, physically unable to get out of bed. And I said to my husband, something's terribly, terribly wrong with me. I can't get up. And I was running half marathons, playing tennis. I mean, I was very, very active, and like I said, and at that time we had three little kids. And so, juggling mom and all of that was going on. So and it was like, and I was even training for a half marathon while we were down there. And for me to not be able to get up and move, I mean, it's, paranoia sets in real fast.
Yeah.
And you're away from home, he's so used to me being so active and being the decision maker and all of these things. And all of a sudden everything flip flops. Right. And,
Yeah.
And it was interesting because it took a few days, but then it seemed like my body started coming back. Right. And we came home, and I went and had a couple of doctor's appointments, and then it seemed to kind of just dissipate.
Yeah.
And like I said, so it went for almost 10 years and didn't resurface. I didn't even know I had it. And I grew up in the woods and riding horses and all that. So I was really used to big fat ticks, but a deer tick bite is very different. And I actually got my Lyme disease through a spider bite. I mean, unequivocally, for sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't discuss that. They think about ticks or mosquitoes or different insects, but it's not discussed a lot about spider bites. And there's a gentleman, the medical medium, Anthony William, and a number of his books, when he talks about Lyme, he does talk about spider bites.
Yeah.
I did get some affirmations from the fact that it can come from that.
And what was the bite like? Do you remember back in the time, did you notice any inflammation or anything around the area?
No, it wasn't like a big red bite. It wasn't like it was on my hand, and it wasn't like a big red thing. And I didn't think about brown recluse spiders, or I didn't think about looking under the bed the next morning, that I recall anyway.
Yeah. You just were completely oblivious to it, and why would you be? Okay. And then if you were, taking you back to the time when you started developing the symptoms, and you had the Super Bowl, you had a young family, it sounds like you had, losing loved ones, lots going on at the time. How much do you think that contributed to you developing, all the symptoms that you had in relation to Lyme? Do you feel like that was a factor? As in, do you think I don't know, when I'm working with clients, and actually when I'm speaking to people and sharing information on this podcast, I always talk about those contributing factors that lead you to develop an autoimmune condition or chronic symptoms or inflammatory symptoms. And that stress piece, it's a bit
Yeah.
vague, isn't it, how much that actually contributes? But do you feel like that without that you wouldn't have actually developed Lyme? Do you feel like you needed both elements?
I think that I think it pushed me over the edge, flat out pushed me over the edge. And I live in an old beach house that was built in 1937. And the original part of the house was built to breathe, right? It literally was built to breathe. It's 4 feet off the ground and it's built to breathe. And the mold that happened in the house wasn't in the old section of the house. It was in a newly renovated section of the house that somebody else had done prior to us moving in. That's where the mold was. And I didn't know that it was there. My daughter actually found it, wanting to play dress up one day and moving clothes back in the guest bedroom closet. And there was black mold all behind these, dresses. And I didn't know that was a heavily molded, and it was also right next to a little tiny room that my children used to play in all the time. So, my children were affected by the mold also. I didn't know it at the time, but my middle son definitely had sinus surgeries. I mean, he was only 5, right? So
Right,
the
yeah, nice.
the mold was affecting my family's health, and I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So when did you discover the mold toxicity in relation to the Lyme? So do you feel like that was like an added factor? Because sometimes I like to explain health and its symptoms as kind of filling a glass of water. And I know that is used a lot to explain histamine, but I think it can just be with any kind of inflammation or any condition. There are these contributing factors, and then suddenly you fill your glass up, it spills over, and that's when you end up with one of these chronic illnesses. So when did you discover the mold, and how much do you think that was contributing to your symptoms?
Well, unfortunately, I wish I'd found the mold earlier, obviously, because being the mom, my husband wasn't affected by the mold as much because I was home more, um, and with my 3 kids. Plus, I was working, but I was still the main base at home, right? And my
Yeah.
husband wasn't as affected by it because he was not in that area of the house as much. So, and it's very interesting that, 2 people can live in the same environment and one can be affected by it and the other person, not be affected by it. But the mold definitely started deteriorating my immune system. As you said, histamine, inflammatory response, all of these things, my body wasn't able to fight it. And as I started getting tested, they were coming up with, Epstein-Barr, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, just all of these diagnoses that are mind blowing. And it creates such a fear factor.
Yeah.
And you're not able to concentrate on healing because you're concentrating on all of these other, viral meningitis. You're concentrating on all these other conditions that you are labeled with that you have no idea all mean the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting point because I think that diagnosis, them exploring, different conditions, different symptoms, then somebody gets on Google and, starts looking into them all, and it's scary. So how did you manage that? And what do you mean by when you said that they all mean the same thing? Because I think that's an interesting point.
Well, you don't know that Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Epstein-Barr, viral meningitis, they're all co-infections of Lyme. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't know that. And had I been in the Northeast and, where it's definitely more prevalent, Boston, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, that's Lyme, Connecticut is kind of, where it all started. That's all in the northeastern part of the United States. And so people were much more aware of it and knew how to treat it and how to treat it and or manage it. And, I went to a pretty world-renowned clinic that's here in Jacksonville, Mayo Clinic. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but,
Yeah.
people come here for getting diagnosis. And I was going to them for 6 years being misdiagnosed. Had I gone to maybe their center in Rochester, New York, maybe I would have gotten the correct diagnosis. I don't know. I think that it was just an early stage of so many early cases of Lyme that I don't know if it would have been, I don't know how much faster it would have happened, quite frankly.
So let's talk about that once you got the diagnosis. Obviously, you seem extremely well, energetic now. So did you go from having Lyme disease to where you are now and writing your book, Silent Killers, and creating your community, the Silent Killer Project? Because now you're helping other people who went through what you went through, aren't you?
Well, I am. And, I'm always learning something new too, right? And I'm always trying to keep my body balanced, and I do it through so many different ways. So I found, to answer your question as far as kind of how did I get through that period, nutrition was a huge key. Anti-inflammatory diet, juicing, the importance of celery juice, just simple things, the simplest of things that I didn't even realize were right in front of me. Drinking celery juice will kill Epstein-Barr, and Epstein-Barr is the basis of all inflammatory diseases. All of these things I learned, and that's why I wrote the book, because it was like I was spending so much money and felt like I lost so many years of my life chasing my own tail, that I was trying to figure out why, what was going on, and how can I help somebody else not go through what I went through. It's interesting, the feedback that I've gotten from different people who didn't know what was going on with them, but then read the book and then started being able to relate to different things I was talking about. So then they went and got tested and found out that, yes, in fact, they did have Lyme disease, and, got tested and got treated faster. There's so many different modalities out there. And I will tell you that one of the most healing modalities that I've used, or as I said, it's a whole combination of things, right? But I've found that have you ever heard of magnetics?
Yes, yeah. I have a few clients that are using that alongside working with me.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what, there's a practitioner here in our area that I found that she does the biomagnetics with emotion code. Have you ever heard of emotion code?
No, I haven't. Would you explain that for us? Actually, would you explain about, this type of
The magnetic treatment?
Yeah.
So they take a positive magnet and a negative magnet, and they basically are balancing your body and your body pH. So they maybe place a positive magnet in one location, a negative magnet in another location. And what they're doing is balancing your natural pH of your body and your natural energy waves of your body. I'm talking simple magnets that literally they take tape, strap it on wherever they're doing it, right? And this practitioner that I see now, that just help for maintenance purposes, she does that. And then there's something called a motion code, which I write about in my book, and anybody can look it up. It is a practice by which people can help you through, essentially it's non-talk therapy. It's somebody helping with you by doing muscle testing and going into your subconscious and being able to pull out stuck emotions, right? So let's say that I don't know that I have this emotion that is trapped in me from the age of 5 or the age of 7 or the age of 10, whatever it is. Motion code practitioners help you identify these trapped emotions. And so it's very interesting. This woman who does the biomagnetic energy balancing, as she's helping with the magnets, she's also talking to your subconscious. So like after a therapy session, she'll maybe touch my heart and say, tell me about your mother. And I'm,
Right.
and so you're thinking, oh my gosh, like you have all of these things that you don't know that you're holding that maybe were trapped emotions from somebody in your past or something that somebody else went through that you were close to, or it's your own emotion, and trying to help just clear emotions that we don't understand or we don't know that are there are very freeing to our central nervous system because we don't know what all we hold.
I completely agree, because I think that's the other part of this, is that our central nervous system has been rewired to, probably think that everything is fearful based on events that happen to us that we don't even remember. And that's where these types of therapies can really help. And there is something called the energy alignment method, which is a method that I've used and worked with the practitioner. And that certainly helps me, rather than just talking. And I'm not against talking therapy at all either. I honestly just think you need to find what's going to work for you. But the energy and alignment wasn't as much of talking about it and going, through everything. But it's interesting how they do it. They do it by asking questions and seeing how your body moves in response to those questions. So it sounds similar.
Very, very similar. Yes, for sure.
And I often will recommend it to my clients who are working with me, and you can see that their central nervous system at the moment is, overstimulated, and that can really help with that.
It's amazing how it helps with it. It really is. And then for them to be able to say, then, it's interesting for them to be able to do the muscle testing and say, okay, this is going to take a few days to clear. Like we can't treat you today, tomorrow, and the next day. We're going to treat you today, and then it's going to take maybe 5 days to clear, or maybe 7 days to clear, or whatever it is that, your body can handle.
I know you've written this amazing book, Silent Killers, and I would love to hear from you what the kind of main takeaways. Obviously, I'm recommending everybody go out and buy the book and read the book, but what are the main takeaways, would you say, from that book? If somebody is listening to this today, either has just been diagnosed with Lyme disease or suspects that they might have Lyme disease or mold toxicity, what would be your kind of 3 recommendations for them today?
I would tell you, number one, keep a positive attitude. Attitude has everything to do with defeating and accomplishing and loving yourself through the situation, because one of my chapters is called Courage is Fear Walking, right? So that's kind of your attitude, right? So yeah. One of my takeaways would definitely be attitude, faith, however you want to call that. My second takeaway would be nutrition. I would be super conscientious about what you're eating. I would add sprouts and celery juice and avocados, and I would seriously look at your nutrition and seeing what you're putting in your body to help support that inflammatory response. And honestly, my other takeaway is going to be exercise in whatever form it is, whether you get out in nature, take a walk, get grounded in the grass, in the water, whatever it is that makes you happy and makes your body happy. That is another takeaway, to be able to get through what you're getting through, because it's easy to shut down, right? Yeah. If you get yourself out of yourself and you go and you say, I'm going to walk in the grass with no shoes on, I'm going to do whatever it is, your favorite form of exercise, just get out and take a walk and not be connected to your phone all the time. If you feel like you have to have your phone on, then play the most fun music possibly and turn off everything else, because there's science that shows that your attitude, your nutrition, and exercising will help you get through almost anything possible. There's so much science that proves that. And so that would be my encouragement to any person anywhere that's trying to figure out what they've got going on. I know you're going to focus on it. We all do, but try to do these other things too. I'll tell you, sometimes in my sickest times, I learned to write a letter of gratitude, simple, a letter of gratitude, and walk down and maybe stick it in my neighbor's mailbox, right? You just changing your brain waves, changing the way you look at things, finding something to be happy about. We all are juggling with so much that's going on in the world, much less our own personal lives, that if we can take away with a positive in every aspect of whatever we're dealing with, it's key.
It definitely is. I think this is such great to emphasize that point, because I completely agree with you that attitude is a key piece of this. I know it's not easy, dependent on what you've been diagnosed with or what you're dealing with on a daily basis, but there will be things in your life. If you look at it from an objective perspective, there are things in your life that you can be grateful for. And the more that you're in that mindset, the better it's going to be for your healing. So I completely agree with that. And I think some people miss that. And, you see a lot of things on social media about, it's horrendous having this and it's horrendous having that. And I understand the struggles and that these struggles are real. But at the end of the day, we need to kind of switch our thinking to this more gratitude practice. And even when I think about my autoimmune conditions, I'm like, thank you for giving me the signs that there are things that are not right in my body, and I know I need to deal with it. So, even that is, something that I'm grateful for. But Jennifer, I've absolutely loved having you on the podcast today. Thank you for sharing your story. It's unbelievable, actually, the journey that you've been through and how you've managed to, come out of it fighting and, fitter than ever, and actually helping lots of people who are going through this as well. So thank you for all that you're doing. Where can people find you?
People can find me on by jennifercbrower.com. They can find me Silent Killers Project. So we're on Instagram, Facebook. You can find my book on Amazon. You can find it's Silent Killers by Jennifer C. Brower. And we do all sorts of gut health resets. We do, anything that we can do to help be beneficial to anybody going through anything. It doesn't have to be just one of these complex disorders. I'll just show you real quick. This is what my book looks like. So you'll see the body and the helix DNA, and
I love that imagery.
Yeah. So it is available, and just like your group, we love to help and support in whatever way. So thank you again so much for having me, and I really appreciate it. And I wish you just all the best, and all the best to your followers, because it's all about that gratitude, and I'm grateful. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks so much again. And I will be putting all those details in the show notes as well. So thank you, Jennifer. Hopefully catch up with you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time. And remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.